The floor trembled beneath Major Jon Harrick's boots as he strode into the training compound of the Intergalactic Military Academy, a crisp salute marking his entry. Despite the barren landscape outside, the facility buzzed with a vibrancy fueled by the arrival of the new cadets. His gaze swept over the eager faces of alien students, each from a corner of the galaxy where the term human resilience was a myth wrapped in awe. The compound, nestled on the arid plains of planet Varkus, stood defiant against the whipping sand winds. Here, gravity clung like a persistent child, heavier than most species preferred. Yet, Harrick moved with ease, his frame adapted to Earth's merciless environment, a stark contrast to the lighter gravity of myriad worlds from which the students hailed. "Welcome to your first real challenge." Harrick's voice cut through the murmurs, sharp and clear. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. His presence commanded attention, not merely for his height, but the palpable confidence he exuded, an unspoken promise that he was as formidable in intellect as in physicality. Today he wore the standard black uniform, its fabric catching the sterile light of the academy halls. His skin, weathered from years under harsh suns, and the tight crop of graying hair gave him an austere look that spoke of many battles, both won and endured. As you learn the art of survival from one of the toughest species in the galaxy, remember, he continued, pacing in front of the holographic displays showing various human military tactics, it's not the strength of the body, but the resilience of the mind that keeps a soldier alive. A murmur of mixed excitement and apprehension whispered through the crowd. Harrick's eyes briefly met those of a towering Galilean, his skin shimmering with a metallic sheen, a subtle nod acknowledging the unspoken challenge between them. Outside, the harsh winds battered the energy shields with a relentless fury that muted the roar to a dull whine. Varkus demanded toughness from its inhabitants. Inside, the climate-controlled environment gave little respite from the psychological pressure that built in anticipation of what was to come. "Your first lesson starts now," Harrick announced, his voice firm, reaching every corner of the room. "Survival is not granted. It is earned through blood, sweat, and unwavering courage." As the students lined up, their varied statures and colors a mosaic of the universe's diversity, Major Harrick prepared to mold them into warriors. They were not just to learn human ways, but to adapt them into their very being. This academy wasn't merely a school. It was the anvil on which the metal of their spirits would be tested. And so, with the red dust swirling beyond the transparent durasteel walls, Major Jon Harrick began the task of teaching these alien students the brutal, yet vital tactics of Deathworlder first aid. Here, under the weight of a hostile world, they would either forge themselves into survivors or falter under the trial. As Major Jon Harrick introduced the first lesson, the atmosphere inside the training hall crackled with a palpable intensity. His gaze swept over the cadets, each alien student absorbing the stark realities of human endurance with varying degrees of trepidation and curiosity. "Today, we dive straight into the heart of human survival tactics," Harrick announced, his voice resonating off the smooth, cold walls of the academy. "You will learn not just to treat, but to thrive under conditions you've only read about in your preps." The major led the group outside, where Varkus's relentless gravity tugged at their limbs with unyielding force. The sun, a fierce white orb in the cloudless sky, beat down on them, its glare unmitigated by the thin atmosphere. The landscape was a tapestry of rugged terrains, the red dust kicking up with each step they took, clinging to their uniforms and gritting between their teeth. An alien student from a lush, water-rich planet struggled noticeably, his gills flaring in the dry air. Harrick approached, clapping a firm hand on his back. "Breathe through it, Cadet Thalos," he advised, his tone both commanding and encouraging. "Adaptation is survival." They reached an open field, the ground uneven and strewn with obstacles designed to simulate battlefield debris. "Your senses must be sharp here," Harrick continued, his eyes scanning the horizon. "The wind carries more than just sand. It brings sounds, sometimes signals of an approaching threat." He picked up a handful of soil, letting the fine grains sift through his fingers and back to the ground. Feel the earth, understand its language. It's firm, yet treacherous, he explained, leading by example as he demonstrated how to maintain balance and move silently over the crunchy surface. The session moved into first aid practices, beginning with basic wound care under simulated combat conditions. Harrick demonstrated on a dummy, his hands sure and efficient as he applied a makeshift bandage. Touch is crucial. Your hands can tell you the severity of a wound even when your eyes cannot see it clearly, he instructed, his voice a mix of sternness and patience. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the training field, the air cooled rapidly, a relief to the students whose bodies were not accustomed to such relentless heat. The smell of dust and exertion was strong, mingled with the faint aroma of the native Varkan flora, a sharp, almost spicy scent that reminded them of the planet's wild, untamed nature. "Listen!" Harrick suddenly commanded as dusk fell. The students fell silent, the only sound the whispering wind and their own heavy breathing. In the distance, a low growl echoed, part of an audio simulation. That sound, recognize it, locate it, react to it. Your survival could depend on it. As night enveloped them, their vision diminished, forcing them to rely more on their hearing and touch. The cool night air was a balm on their sun-scorched skin, bringing a momentary respite as they gathered around Harrick. "This is just the beginning," he said, his figure silhouetted against the starlit sky. "By the end of this program, you will not merely endure, you will master these elements. This planet, as harsh as it is, will be your teacher." And with that, Major Harrick turned and led them back to the compound, their senses heightened, their resolve tested but unbroken, ready for the challenges of the next day. As the alien cadets returned to the Academy's confines, the stark transition from the wild red dusk of Varkus to the subdued glow of the training room was a jarring welcome. Their senses still tingling from the day's rigorous exercises, they found the artificial calm inside almost eerie. Major Jon Harrick stood at the front, beside a holographic display that flickered to life, casting pale blue light across his stern features. "Tonight we explore the resilience of the human body," he declared, his voice a resonant bass that seemed to tap directly into their nerves. "Pay close attention, for these lessons could one day save your lives, or the lives of your comrades." The room buzzed with the low murmur of alien dialects as Harrick initiated the display. Images of human anatomical structures appeared, rotating slowly. His finger traced the air as he highlighted various organs, bones, and tissues, each tap bringing a new system into focus. "Unlike many species, humans have evolved under constant threat from their environment," Harrick explained. The hologram zoomed in on the human skin, displaying its multi-layered complexity. "This," he pointed, "is not just a barrier, but a dynamic organ capable of extensive repair and sensory input." A young cadet from a species known for their translucent skin whispered in awe, "It's like armor that feels." Harrick nodded, pleased with the analogy. "Exactly. And beneath that, the redundancy in vital systems. Multiple pathways for blood, overlapping nerves. Humans are built to endure, to continue functioning even when partially impaired." The lesson shifted to the practical. A dummy lay on a table, marked with various injuries. Harrick demonstrated the pressure points to control bleeding, his hands deft in their movements, each press precise and measured. "In the chaos of battle, your senses will be overwhelmed. Learn to trust the feel of a pulse, the give of a wound under your fingers." The cadets gathered around, their eyes wide, the room filled with the sharp tang of antiseptic from the medical kits being opened. Harrick passed a scanner over the dummy, the device emitting a soft glow as it mapped out injuries. "Visual aids are tools, not crutches. In the field, your equipment may fail. Your senses and your knowledge must not." As the demonstration ended, the students were invited to practice. Harrick moved among them, correcting a grip here, adjusting an angle there. His praise was sparse but meaningful, pushing them to excel, to understand deeply the workings of the bodies they might one day be tasked to mend. The session culminated in a simulated triage scenario. Lights dimmed to mimic twilight conditions. Sounds of a distant battle played over speakers, testing their ability to focus amid distractions. Each student was tasked with assessing injuries, prioritizing care under Harrick's watchful eye. As the exercise wound down, Harrick's voice cut through the dimming chaos. Remember, the body is just the beginning. The will to survive, that comes from here. He tapped his temple gently. And heart, he added, hand over his chest, a rare smile breaking his stern demeanor. As they left the training room, the alien cadets felt a new weight of responsibility on their shoulders, not just to act, but to understand, to connect with the beings they might save. It was a profound lesson, one that stretched beyond the mechanics of medicine into the essence of being a soldier. As the alien cadets filed out of the training room, their minds were abuzz with the new insights into human physiology and resilience. Major Jon Harrick, however, was just beginning to peel back the layers of their training. The next morning brought a cold dawn, the sky a palette of dark blues and grays, the air crisp and tinged with the metallic scent of morning dew mixed with the distant saltiness of Varkus's scant seas. "Today," Harrick announced as they gathered in a semicircle around him on the open field, "we delve deeper into what makes humans survivors beyond mere physicality." His voice carried clearly in the morning air, a stark contrast to the soft rustling of the red grass underfoot. He led them to a new setup, an array of biosimulators programmed to mimic human physiological responses under stress. "Observe," he instructed as he activated the first simulator. It displayed a human's response to hypothermia, the shivering, the bluing of the skin, and the gradual slowing of metabolic functions. "Feel this," he invited, guiding a cadet's hand to touch the synthetic skin, cold and clammy. "Human skin reacts to preserve heat. What do you feel?" he asked, looking into the cadet's widening eyes. "Ice," the cadet replied, his voice a mix of wonder and shock. "Exactly. And now, watch." Harrick adjusted the simulator to show rapid rewarming techniques, explaining each step. The cadets leaned in, the smell of the warmed synthetic flesh filling the air, a stark reminder of the thin line between life and death in the void of space or on a frigid battlefield. The lesson moved to a harsher scenario: blood loss and shock management. Humans can lose up to 15% of their blood volume before shock sets in, Harrick explained as he demonstrated compression techniques on another simulator, its blood a bright, artificial crimson that soaked into the bandages. The ground beneath them was hard, unyielding, much like the lesson he imparted. "Listen to the rhythm of the heartbeat," he said, pressing a stethoscope into a cadet's hands. The beat was steady, then faltering as Harrick simulated an injury. "Now, act!" The cadets' movements were hesitant at first, then more assured as the lesson sank in. The sounds of the simulator's artificial breaths and the cadets' focused breathing blending with the distant calls of Varkus's native birds, a harsh cawing sound that seemed to mock their attempts at mastery. As the sun climbed higher, its light harsh and unfiltered by any cloud, it cast stark shadows across their training ground, the light glinting off Harrick's insignia, a silent testament to his years of service and survival. "Each one of you will face your own trials," he said, his tone somber. "What you learn here about the human spirit, about tenacity, and the will to overcome, that will define your path forward." The training session ended with a quiet moment, each cadet absorbing the weight of Harrick's words. They dispersed under the brightening sky, the taste of dust and determination mingling on their tongues, carrying with them not just the knowledge of how to save a body, but perhaps also a soul in the crucible of war. Under the intensifying glare of Varkus's sun, the day's lesson concluded with the cadets pondering Major Jon Harrick's final words. They carried a mixture of resolve and uncertainty as they marched towards the simulation arena, the newest addition to their rigorous training regimen. Today marked a pivotal moment in their course, a real test of their newly acquired medical skills under simulated combat conditions. "Today, you'll apply everything we've covered," Harrick announced, his voice echoing off the metal walls that surrounded the vast, makeshift battlefield, strewn with debris and obstacles. The arena was designed to mimic an urban war zone, complete with smoke machines and olfactory emitters releasing the scents of burning rubber and electrical fires. As the cadets geared up, the air filled with the distinct smell of their fear and anticipation. They adjusted their protective gear, the fabric rasping against their diverse skins, each movement stirring the dust that blanketed the ground. Harrick watched them, his expression unreadable. "Remember, the enemy is unpredictability itself," he reminded them as they lined up at the starting point. "Stay sharp, stay alive." With a sharp gesture, Harrick signaled the start of the simulation. Instantly, the field erupted with the sounds of simulated gunfire and explosions. Smoke billowed around them, severely reducing visibility as they navigated through the chaos. The first casualty was a dummy, its limbs splayed out grotesquely under a collapsed beam. The nearest cadet, a tall, thin being from a planet of shadows, hesitated, his eyes scanning the surroundings. Sensing movement, he darted forward, his hands trembling as he assessed the injuries, a compound fracture simulated with disturbing realism. "Pressure!" Harrick's voice cut through the din, sharp as a scalpel. The cadet nodded, applying a makeshift tourniquet with rapid, jerky motions. The scenario escalated quickly. Screams, recorded yet chillingly real, sounded from speakers hidden beneath the rubble. The cadets moved from one casualty to the next, their faces streaked with artificial blood and sweat. The tang of metallic paint mixed with their natural scents, creating an acrid, unsettling aroma. Above, the sky turned a deeper shade of crimson, the setting sun casting elongated shadows that merged with the smoke, creating eerie, shifting forms that disoriented the senses further. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, every sound a potential danger. As the exercise neared its climax, a sudden silence fell over the arena, more disquieting than the cacophony before. The cadets froze, senses heightened, searching the dimming light for what was next. Then, from the far end of the field, a new challenge emerged, a scenario involving chemical exposure. The smell of chlorine filled the air, a harsh, invasive odor that made their eyes water and throats burn. "This is where you prove yourselves," Harrick's voice boomed over the intercom. His figure appeared on a raised platform, overseeing the field with a strategic eye. "Handle this, and you handle anything." As the cadets rallied, applying their chemical hazard training, the sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the arena into twilight. They worked through the scenario with a desperate intensity, knowing that every second could mean the difference between life and death, even in a simulation. The exercise ended as night enveloped the world, leaving the cadets exhausted but exhilarated, their minds racing with what might come next. Each breath they took was heavy with the cold night air and the weight of their experiences, knowing they had crossed a threshold but facing the mystery of what lay beyond. As twilight deepened into a pitch-black Varkus night, the cadets gathered their gear, their bodies weary, but minds alight with the rush of surviving the simulation's day-long ordeal. Major Jon Harrick, silhouetted against the newly activated floodlights, surveyed his charges with a discerning eye. The harsh white light cast long shadows and painted the training field in stark contrasts of light and dark, mirroring the psychological landscape of the training they underwent. "Today was about survival. Tomorrow we strategize," Harrick announced, his voice cutting through the chilly night air. The cadets stood in rapt attention, their fatigue momentarily forgotten in the wake of his commanding presence. "Get some rest. You'll need it." As the cadets dispersed to their quarters, the quiet of the night was punctuated only by the distant howling of Varkus's nocturnal creatures, their cries strange and alien, yet oddly synchronous with the whistling wind that carried the scents of night-blooming flora, a sharp, pungent reminder of the planet's untamed nature. Dawn broke with a crisp clarity. The cadets reconvened in the simulation arena, where Harrick had arranged a new set of challenges. Today, the debris had been cleared to reveal a complex labyrinth of makeshift urban structures designed to test not only their medical skills, but their tactical acumen. "Today you'll work in teams," Harrick instructed as he handed out maps of the labyrinth. Each team will navigate to the center, encountering various medical and tactical challenges along the way. Coordination and strategy will be your best allies. The air was tinged with the scent of morning dew, mixed with the metallic tang of the artificial structures. As the teams formed and set out, the ground beneath their feet was firm, the remnant coolness of the night seeping through their boots, providing a fleeting respite from the rising heat of the morning sun. Inside the labyrinth, the echo of their footsteps bounced off the walls, creating a disorienting cacophony that tested their focus. Artificial smoke was pumped intermittently through vents, reducing visibility to mere meters and forcing the cadets to rely heavily on the tactile maps and their own communication skills to navigate. "Left here, then straight," one cadet whispered, his voice barely audible over the hiss of the smoke machines and the soft rustle of their movements. Their hands brushed against the cold, rough surfaces of the walls, each texture a new paragraph in the story of their journey. At each checkpoint, Harrick had staged medical emergencies. Dummies with various simulated injuries lay waiting for the teams to diagnose and treat under pressure. "Quick, apply pressure here," a cadet called out, directing his team members' hands to the right spot as they worked to stabilize a hemorrhaging wound. With each challenge, the cadets' confidence grew, but so did the complexity of the tasks. From treating shock in one corner to mitigating the effects of a supposed gas attack in another, every turn brought a new test, a new problem to solve. As they reached the center of the labyrinth, the final challenge awaited. A casualty with multiple severe injuries, the scenario designed to require all hands on deck. The team members moved with a fluidity born of necessity, their actions a dance choreographed by urgency. As they stabilized the last dummy, Harrick's voice boomed from the overhead speakers. "Well done, but remember, the battlefield is ever-changing. Today's victories are tomorrow's lessons." The cadets exited the labyrinth, the bright sunlight stark after the dim, fraught passages they'd navigated. They were met with not only the relief of completion, but the realization that each step, each decision, had built upon the last, crafting them into not just survivors, but thinkers, strategists, true warriors of their own fates. As the cadets emerged from the labyrinth, squinting against the bright glare of the morning sun, Major Jon Harrick's keen eyes appraised their sweat-drenched forms. They had navigated the simulation with a precision that spoke of growing competence and an understanding deeper than they had possessed at the start. Yet the day was far from over. "Regroup, hydrate, and prepare," Harrick commanded, his voice resolute against the backdrop of Varkus's relentless heat. The air was thick with the scent of exertion and the faint, earthy aroma of disturbed red soil, a testament to their rigorous activity. No sooner had they replenished their water supplies than a siren wailed, a piercing sound that cut through the brief respite, setting every nerve on edge. Harrick stood at the edge of a new field, this one rigged with even more daunting obstacles. Deep trenches filled with dark, murky water and high walls that cast long, ominous shadows across the ground. "This is not just about speed or even technique," Harrick explained as the cadets lined up, their expressions a mix of determination and apprehension. "This is about endurance. Your next challenge starts now." With a curt nod, the cadets plunged into the new scenario. The ground beneath their feet was uneven, the soil loose and treacherous. As they maneuvered through the trenches, the cold mud clung to their skin, adding weight with every step, pulling at them like the very gravity of Varkus itself sought to claim them. Overhead, the sun was a relentless overseer, its rays beating down mercilessly. Yet, within the trenches, shadows prevailed, playing tricks on their eyes. Every splash and every movement echoed off the earthen walls, creating a disorienting cacophony of sounds. The water's icy grip contrasted sharply with the sun's fiery kiss, a sensory clash that tested their resilience. At intervals along the course, Harrick had positioned medical dummies, each presenting complex injuries that mimicked battlefield trauma. "Apply a chest seal," shouted one cadet to another as they addressed a pneumothorax simulation, their voices urgent over the sound of rushing water. Further along, a dummy was rigged to mimic seizures caused by a neurotoxic agent. Working swiftly, The cadets administered simulated anticonvulsants, their hands steady even as their own limbs trembled with fatigue. As they approached the final obstacle, a towering wall smeared with slick, viscous mud, the real test of their stamina began. One by one, they helped each other up, their hands slipping, grasping, securing holds wherever they could. The wall was steep, and as they climbed, the scent of the mud filled their nostrils, a pungent reminder of the planet's unforgiving nature. "Push through!" Harrick's voice thundered from somewhere above them. His figure was just a silhouette against the sun, but his presence was as palpable as the wall they scaled. Exhausted but unyielded, the cadets reached the summit, their breaths heavy in the now cooling air. As they crested the top, they were not met with the sight of a gentle descent, but a view of yet another field, rigged with unknown challenges. Silhouetted against the setting sun, Harrick's figure turned to face the new battlefield. "Your training is far from over," he stated, a mysterious edge to his tone that hinted at the trials yet to come, stirring a mix of dread and anticipation in the hearts of his weary students. As the cadets surveyed the new field, their chests heaving with exertion, Major Jon Harrick's voice echoed in the encroaching dusk. "The battle isn't won at the peak, but beyond it." Before them lay a daunting stretch of simulated urban combat zone, complete with shattered buildings and overturned vehicles, all bathed in the eerie glow of emergency lights that flickered sporadically. The cadets' boots crunched over gravel and debris as they entered the zone. The air was thick with the smell of faux smoke and the tang of simulated blood, designed to mimic the chaotic aftermath of a battle. As they navigated through the rubble, the sounds of their movements were muffled by the soft hissing of steam rising from broken pipes, adding a visceral layer to the illusion of devastation. "Stay alert," Harrick instructed, his voice a sharp contrast to the soft groans of the shifting debris underfoot. "Your objective is to secure the area, assess the casualties, and extract them to the evacuation point." In the dim light, figures appeared, draped over the remnants of what once were walls and vehicles. As the cadets approached, sensors triggered, causing the figures, their training mannequins, to emit realistic groans and cries of pain. Each team member was forced to decide in an instant whether to administer first aid or move the wounded to a safer location. "Check for responsiveness," one cadet called out, pressing his fingers to the neck of a mannequin to feel for a pulse programmed to simulate the faint, erratic beating of a heart. His team worked around him, voices low but firm, calling out injuries and coordinating their efforts with practiced precision. Suddenly, without warning, a loud siren blared, and the ground beneath them shuddered, a simulation of an aftershock. Dust billowed up, clouding their vision and coating their tongues with grit. The cadets staggered but quickly regained their footing, demonstrating their growing adaptability to the unpredictable conditions. "Move, move!" another cadet yelled as they guided their injured through the unstable terrain, the sharp scent of electrical burn wafting through the air as another damaged conduit sparked ominously nearby. Reaching the extraction point was a trial of their endurance and teamwork. Each member of the squad had to rely not just on their own strength, but also on the support of their comrades. As they laid the last of the wounded on the designated evacuation pallets, Harrick's figure emerged from the shadows, his clapping breaking the tension that had gripped them. "Today, you've moved beyond mere survival," he said, surveying the exhausted but exhilarated faces. "You've embraced the chaos of combat and emerged cohesive and competent." As night fully settled, the emergency lights cast long shadows across the field, transforming the cadets' tired faces into masks of resolve. Harrick pointed towards the east, where the first hint of dawn promised a new day. "Rest now," he concluded, turning to leave them with their thoughts. "Tomorrow, we escalate." The mystery of his final words hung in the air, mingling with the night's chill, leaving the cadets to ponder what greater challenges lay ahead, their senses still tingling from the day's trials. As dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale light that slowly dissolved the darkness enveloping the training field, the cadets felt the weight of Major Jon Harrick's ominous parting words from the night before. Huddled in their temporary camp just beyond the urban combat simulation area, they shared a quick, meager breakfast, their bodies tensed in anticipation of the unknown challenges ahead. Today, your tactical skills will be tested under even more severe conditions, Harrick announced as they gathered around him, the morning air crisp and carrying the tang of dew-covered metal from the nearby equipment. The sky was awash of soft blues and grays, the tranquility of its colors belying the rigor of the day's upcoming trials. The Major led them to a new section of the training field, this one meticulously set up to resemble a hostile extraterrestrial environment. Artificial geysers spewed cold steam into the air, creating a mist that clung to their skin and chilled their bones. The ground underfoot was uneven, covered with a fine ash-like substance that made footing uncertain. Your mission is to navigate through this terrain, secure the objective at the center, and extract without casualties, Harrick explained, pointing to a dimly visible structure in the distance, obscured by the artificially generated fog. As the cadets embarked on their mission, the sounds of their steps were muffled by the ash, each footfall a soft thud. Their breaths formed little clouds of vapor in the chill air, mingling with the mist that swirled around them. Visibility was reduced to just a few meters ahead, each shadow and shape a potential threat. Without warning, alarms blared, a high, piercing sound that sliced through the foggy silence. Simulated enemy drones, small and fast-moving, darted in and out of the mist, forcing the cadets to duck and weave as they advanced. The drones were equipped with sensors to detect sudden movements, adding an extra layer of complexity to their task. "Steady," one cadet whispered to another, her voice a low murmur against the cacophony of alarms and the hissing of the geysers. "Use the fog to your advantage. Move slowly." They reached the central structure, a dome-shaped building that loomed ghostly and imposing against the misty backdrop. Inside, the objective, a data module, needed to be retrieved. The cadets entered cautiously, their senses heightened, the smell of damp and mold strong in the enclosed space. "Cover me," a cadet named Elios murmured as he approached the module. His fingers were swift and sure as he deactivated the security measures, his actions nearly silent in the quiet of the dome. Just as he secured the module, another alarm sounded, this one indicating the imminent arrival of enemy reinforcements. "Time to move out." Harrick's voice came over their comms, urgent but controlled. With the module in hand, the team retraced their steps through the foggy, ashen landscape, the adrenaline surging as they navigated back to their starting point. Their lungs burned with the cold air, their limbs heavy with fatigue, but the sense of accomplishment was palpable as they completed the mission without a simulated casualty. As they gathered around Harrick, the sun finally breaking through the morning mist, he nodded in approval. "Well done. But remember, the battlefield is always evolving. What works today may not tomorrow." His words lingered in the air, a reminder that their training was far from over, and the mystery of what lay ahead remained as dense as the fog they had just conquered. As the morning mist dissipated under the strengthening sun, the cadets felt the tangible shift from the shadowy uncertainty of the foggy terrain to the clarity of daylight. Major Jon Harrick led them to a starkly different part of the training ground, a desolate area strewn with what appeared to be remnants of a downed spacecraft. The metallic wreckage lay scattered across the sandy floor, half buried under Varkus's red dust that painted everything with an ochre tint. "Today's exercise," Harrick began, his voice echoing slightly off the twisted metal, "is about resourcefulness and rapid adaptation. You need to extract usable material from this wreckage to create emergency shelters. The sun won't be your friend for long." The cadets approached the challenge with a newfound vigor, spurred by the mysteries that had unfolded over the days. They navigated the debris field, their hands probing the cool metal, the sharp edges casting long, thin shadows in the early light. The air carried a tang of scorched electronics and the pungent odor of burnt insulation, which stung their nostrils and coated their tongues with a bitter taste. "Watch for sharp edges and unstable structures," Harrick instructed as they sifted through the rubble. The sounds of metal clanging, being dragged and rearranged, filled the area, a cacophony of survival-driven industry. In the distance, the soft roar of the artificial wind generator started up, sending gusts that whipped up mini-cyclones of dust and debris. The cadets shielded their eyes, the grit biting into any exposed skin, reminding them of the planet's harshness. Amid the chaos, a cadet named Jiro found a large, relatively intact panel of spacecraft hull. "Over here!" he called out, his voice competing with the wind. His team members hurried over, and together they hoisted the heavy piece, maneuvering it towards the designated build area. "Quick thinking," Harrick noted, his approval clear even in his curt nod. "But keep your eyes on the environment. It's always changing." As the cadets worked to secure their makeshift shelters, dark clouds began to gather swiftly overhead, a simulation of an approaching storm programmed by Harrick to test their preparedness. Within minutes, the first drops of simulated rain began to fall, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. The cadets rushed to reinforce their shelters, the sound of the heavy raindrops pummeling the metal, creating a deafening drumbeat. Their shelters held up, a testament to their growing competence. Drenched but triumphant, they gathered under the makeshift roofs, listening to the rain. In those moments, the chill of the water was oddly invigorating, washing away some of the day's grime and fatigue. As the storm simulation ceased and the clouds cleared, Harrick's silhouette appeared against the now calm sky. "Well done, but always remember the calm after the storm is just another phase. The cycle always repeats," he said, his voice carrying a hint of foreboding. The cadets pondered his words, realizing the training was not just about physical challenges, but mental resilience and the anticipation of the unexpected. As they looked towards where Harrick pointed next, a new section of the training ground shrouded in artificial twilight. Their nerves tingled with anticipation, wondering what shadows they would have to face next under the veil of dusk. As the cadets approached the next challenge, a strange, unfamiliar chill crept across the training ground. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows over the craggy terrain. The night had brought a sudden change, the air now crisp and sharp against their skin. The terrain ahead was unrecognizable, smooth surfaces that reflected the setting sun in strange, glinting patterns, as if the planet itself had shifted into an alien dimension. Major Jon Harrick stood at the edge of the field, his silhouette sharp against the backdrop of a dimming sky. "Move," he said tersely, his voice steady but layered with something unspoken. The cadets immediately began their approach, wary of what lay ahead. The air was thick with the scents of wet earth and the faintest hint of burnt metal, mixed with something sweeter, like crushed flowers that did not belong on a war-torn planet. The ground was no longer covered in the same ashen dust. Instead, it had transformed into a slick, uneven surface that shifted beneath their boots. The unusual texture beneath their feet gave way with each step, sending ripples of unease through their bodies. The scent of the earth was strangely pungent now, raw and unfamiliar, as if something beneath the surface had been disturbed. Every footstep sounded hollow, absorbed by the terrain, making their movements feel isolated. "I don't like this," Jiro muttered under his breath, his voice low but laced with concern. The others nodded in agreement but said nothing, their bodies tense, aware that this was no ordinary test. They moved in pairs, navigating the eerie landscape, their hands brushing against the smooth walls of alien formations that seemed to pulse with some internal energy. The air buzzed, not with sound but with a strange vibration, a sensation that seemed to crawl under their skin. It was almost as if the ground itself was alive. "Stay sharp," Harrick ordered, his presence imposing, even as he stood a few paces behind them. "This environment is designed to disorient. Trust your instincts and stay focused." As they advanced, the air grew colder, an unnatural drop in temperature that made their breath visible. The eerie stillness of the surroundings was broken only by the occasional shudder of the ground beneath them, as if something large and unseen was moving beneath the surface. The cadets quickened their pace, urgency creeping into their actions, but the landscape ahead remained obscured by an impenetrable fog that began to roll in, obscuring their view. "Something's wrong," whispered Elias, his voice tight with suspicion. His hand reached for his weapon instinctively, though they had been warned the exercise would be non-lethal. The tension between the cadets was palpable, each of them feeling the weight of the silence that had swallowed them whole. Suddenly, a loud crack reverberated through the air, a noise so sharp it cut through the fog. The ground beneath them heaved violently, and the cadets stumbled as the terrain buckled and shifted. The pulse in the ground intensified, and with it came the sound of something massive moving beneath the surface, deep and resonant, like the heartbeat of the planet itself. Harrick stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. "You've just begun to feel the pulse of this world," he said, his words heavy with implication. "This is the edge of chaos. It's only going to get worse from here." The cadets exchanged wary glances, feeling the weight of his words settle over them. They had crossed into something beyond a simple test, something that stretched the boundaries of their training. The unknown was no longer a distant concept. It was now their reality. They pushed forward, their senses alert, each step more deliberate than the last. The storm was building, and they knew the true test was yet to come. The ground continued to tremble underfoot as the cadets pressed forward, the oppressive fog curling around them like a living thing. Their breathing was shallow, their minds alert to every shift, every crack in the earth that might herald another seismic disturbance. Major Jon Harrick led them, unwavering, his sharp gaze scanning the horizon of shifting alien terrain. The atmosphere had grown heavier, saturated with an almost palpable sense of foreboding. The air, thick with humidity, clung to their clothes like wet silk, weighing them down as they moved through the fog. Each breath tasted of metal and earth, sharp and bitter on their tongues, while their skin prickled with the eerie stillness that filled the space between their footsteps. As they neared a narrow ravine that seemed to split the landscape, Jiro spoke, his voice cutting through the oppressive quiet. "This isn't just a simulation. Something feels off." Elios glanced at him, his face taut with focus. "You can feel it too, huh? It's like the ground knows we're here." Ahead, Harrick halted. "Focus. Whatever comes next, you'll face it as a unit. This is no longer about individual skill. It's about your ability to adapt, together." The fog parted slightly, revealing the jagged edges of the ravine. The walls on either side loomed high, their surfaces slick with condensation, reflecting an unnatural gleam in the half-light. As the cadets entered, the temperature seemed to plummet, their breath turning to mist in the chilling air. The faintest echo of their movements reverberated through the canyon, amplifying the sense of being surrounded by something vast and unknowable. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shifted with a sharp crack, a sound like thunder splitting the earth itself. The cadets froze, their eyes darting toward the source. Without warning, the rock face to their left splintered, sending a cascade of debris tumbling toward them. The air filled with dust, thick and gritty, as sharp shards of rock embedded themselves into the ground, the sound of their impact deafening in the confined space. "Move! Now!" Harrick shouted, his voice firm, pushing them into action. The cadets scrambled to evade the falling rocks, ducking into the shelter of the ravine's deeper recesses. Their hearts hammered in their chests as adrenaline surged through their veins, but there was no time to waste. They needed to get out, and fast. "Up!" Elios barked, gripping the ledge of a rock formation and hauling himself up. The others followed, their fingers digging into the rough surface, the grit scraping their palms as they climbed with frantic urgency. The sharp smell of wet stone filled the air, mingling with the stench of the debris still hanging in the atmosphere. Just as they reached the top, the ground beneath them heaved again. This time there was no warning, just a powerful, violent tremor that sent them sprawling. The earth buckled as if some great, unseen force were pushing from below, and the entire ravine seemed to shift. Harrick's voice came again, low and commanding. "Hold fast! Get to the plateau, now!" They scrambled toward the edge, the air now thick with the scent of ionized rock and crushed earth. A faint, unnatural glow flickered at the plateau's edge, casting an eerie blue light over the scene. The cadets paused for a split second as they caught sight of what lay ahead, an imposing structure, ancient and otherworldly, half buried beneath the shifting soil. "What the hell is that?" Jiro whispered, his voice tight with disbelief. The structure loomed, its silhouette shadowed against the dimming sky, and for the first time in their training, the cadets felt the full weight of their unknown enemy pressing in around them. Something was waiting, watching, and they could feel it, a heavy silence stretching out before them. "We're just getting started," Harrick muttered, his eyes fixed on the ruin, the mystery of what lay ahead almost tangible in the charged air. The ruin before them stood like a dark monument to something long forgotten, its surface marred by time, but its shape unmistakable, a structure not built by any human hand. The cadets moved forward cautiously, the weight of Major Harrick's silence pressing down on them like the still air. The faint, unnatural glow from within the ruin cast eerie shadows, creating jagged lines that seemed to move as the cadets drew closer. Each step on the broken ground made their boots sink slightly, the crunch of gravel underfoot breaking the tense quiet in sharp contrast to the thick stillness around them. "Form up," Harrick's voice finally broke the silence, cold and commanding as ever. "This is an unknown environment. We'll approach with caution, but we need to act quickly. This place isn't just a ruin, it's an opportunity." Jiro, ever the skeptic, glanced at the massive structure, his brow furrowed. "What's the plan, sir? This thing, whatever it is, doesn't exactly scream friendly." Harrick's eyes narrowed, his focus unshaken. "We're going to need to secure it. We don't know what's inside, but I suspect we'll find something important, maybe even something we can use. It's not just the structure that matters, it's the energy coming from it. We'll need to isolate the area, set up a perimeter, and deploy scouts." The cadets exchanged glances as Harrick outlined their strategy. His voice had softened slightly, but there was no mistaking the underlying urgency in his words. "Jiro, Elios, you'll stay with me. The rest of you, spread out, but keep your comms open. We're here to gather intel, not to engage unless we have no choice. Understand?" "Understood," came the chorus of voices, the cadets' determination growing as they prepared for the task ahead. They didn't speak much as they fanned out, their movements deliberate, eyes scanning every angle. The air around the ruin was thick with an unknown charge, a hum that vibrated through their teeth, filling the space between their words. The closer they got to the structure, the more oppressive the atmosphere felt. The glow from within pulsed rhythmically, as though it had a heartbeat of its own, its light shimmering against the dust and shadows. Harrick, leading the way, slowed his pace, eyes scanning every inch of the ancient stone that seemed to vibrate with an energy they couldn't yet explain. "Jiro, stay on the left flank. Elios, take the right. Watch for traps or any kind of movement," Harrick instructed. The tension in his voice was subtle, but the weight of the command was clear. This was no ordinary mission. They were approaching something that didn't belong to their world, and the implications of that realization made each of them more cautious. The cadets worked in seamless synchrony, establishing their perimeter around the structure. Elios crouched, tapping his earpiece. "Clear on this side. No movement detected." Jiro moved to the left, his eyes narrowed as he inspected the uneven ground. "Same here, sir, but the energy levels, they're rising. I can feel it." Harrick's eyes remained fixed on the glowing entrance. "It's time. We move in, carefully." As they approached the structure's entrance, the air thickened. The pulsing light seemed to draw them in, beckoning them forward, and for a moment there was a collective breath, held in anticipation. Each cadet felt it, the weight of the unknown, the anticipation of the mystery that lay just beyond the threshold. Harrick's hand hovered over his weapon, ready for whatever lay ahead. "Ready yourself," he whispered. The cadets, now more united than ever, braced themselves, hearts pounding in their chests. The cadets stood at the threshold of the ruin, the faint, rhythmic pulse of light from within casting long shadows over their faces. The air around them was heavy, thick with something they couldn't place, a tension that seemed to choke the breath from their lungs. Harrick's figure loomed ahead, a beacon of certainty in an environment that felt increasingly alien. His gaze never wavered from the pulsating doorway, and in that moment, the mystery that had eluded them for so long was finally within reach. "We've come this far." Harrick's voice was low but carried the weight of finality. "But remember, nothing worth having is handed to you. This is the crucible. This is where you prove you're more than just soldiers. You're Deathworlders, survivors. You carry what no other species has, the will to fight against the odds, to rise when the universe would rather see you fall. Jiro's fingers twitched on his weapon as he surveyed the darkened interior of the ruin. "What's inside, sir?" "We don't even know what we're dealing with." Harrick didn't hesitate. "We'll find out together. Whatever this is, we'll face it like we always do, with strategy, with purpose, and with each other." The cadets moved forward, their senses heightened, each footstep an echo of the tension that gripped them. The entrance loomed ahead like a gaping maw, but as they crossed the threshold, the air seemed to shift. It was colder here, the light dimmer, and the walls, alien in their composition, seemed to pulse with a quiet, almost imperceptible rhythm, as if the very structure was alive, waiting. "Keep your heads," Harrick's voice cut through the thick silence. "We move as one." No mistakes. The cadets advanced, their breaths sharp in the cold air. The walls around them were lined with strange, hieroglyphic-like markings, alien symbols that twisted and turned like they were alive. The further they ventured, the more the cadets felt the weight of the unknown pressing in. The unsettling silence grew heavier, but they pushed forward. Suddenly the ground trembled, a low vibration that ran through their bones. From the shadows at the far end of the chamber, a figure emerged, tall, dark, and shrouded in a cloak of shifting shadows. Its eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light, and the air crackled with an energy that made the hairs on the cadets' necks stand on end. It was an entity beyond their understanding, and yet, there it was, a tangible force that had waited for them to step into its domain. The cadets halted instinctively, their weapons raised, but Harrick stepped forward, his voice calm and unwavering. "We're not here to conquer. We're here to survive, and we will." The alien creature's gaze flicked toward Harrick, the light in its eyes flickering with something akin to recognition. It tilted its head, as if assessing the man before it, before finally speaking, its voice like the grinding of stone. "You dare stand before me, Deathworlder? You think your kind is worthy?" Harrick stood tall, unwavering. "We don't need your approval. We don't need anything but our will to survive. That's what makes us different from the rest of the galaxy. We fight when the universe wants us to bow. We rise when every other race would fall. This is our strength. This is why we are feared. This is why we endure." The alien's expression faltered, the weight of Harrick's words clearly affecting it. It paused, studying him, then slowly stepped back. "You have earned your place," it muttered, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something resembling respect in its eyes. "Go. Your kind may yet be the last of its kind, but you will survive." As the creature faded into the shadows, the cadets stood, their chests heaving with breathless anticipation. They had entered the unknown, and in doing so, they had proven not just to themselves, but to the galaxy what it meant to be human. The challenge had been met, not by brute force alone, but by the unyielding spirit that defined them. Major Harrick turned to the cadets, his voice low but filled with a gravity that would linger long after the mission was over. "This is what it means to be Deathworlders. This is why we are feared." And with those words, the cadets, now more than just soldiers, began their journey back, their resolve cemented in the weight of the unknown they had conquered. Their strength was not just in their bodies, but in their hearts, and that was what made humanity unstoppable. The ruins were silent now, the pulse of energy that had once filled the air ebbing away into nothingness. The cadets stood at the threshold, their breath steady, though their minds raced. Major Jon Harrick's words still lingered in the space between them, a powerful reminder of what they had just faced and what they had become. The alien entity had recognized their worth, had seen in them something that no other species had, something raw and unstoppable. The cadets felt the weight of it now, the knowledge that they were no longer simply survivors. They were warriors forged in the crucible of a universe that would sooner see them crushed than victorious. And yet, they had risen. Harrick turned to face them, his eyes as unyielding as ever. But there was something different in his gaze now, a recognition that went beyond their skills or their tactics. It was something deeper, something that connected them all, something that was undeniable. "We've proven what we are," he said, his voice unwavering. "But let's be clear. This isn't just about strength. It's about what we stand for. It's about the refusal to kneel when the universe demands it. This is humanity's gift, and that gift is what makes us unstoppable." The cadets felt it then, their resolve, their unity, the unspoken bond that had formed between them over the course of this trial. They were more than just soldiers now. They were a force of nature, a living testament to the strength of their species. The galaxy had watched them, had tested them, and now it would fear them. The fear wasn't just in their power or their might. It was in their unwavering will to survive. It was in their ability to fight when all seemed lost, to rise when there was no hope, and to always, always push forward. Jiro's voice broke through the silence, rough with emotion. "We didn't just survive this, did we? We changed something. We showed them." Elios nodded, his face hard but his eyes bright with understanding. "We didn't just fight for our lives. We fought for the future, for humanity." Harrick's lips curled into a rare, approving smile. "That's exactly right. Humanity doesn't just fight to survive. We fight to thrive, to take what's ours and never back down. And now the universe will know that." The cadets took a moment to let the weight of his words sink in. The ruin behind them was no longer a symbol of the unknown, a place of darkness and mystery. It was a place where they had proven that humanity could not be ignored, that no force in the galaxy could hold them back. They had faced the unimaginable and come out stronger, unbroken, and united. The universe had tested them, but it had only shown them one truth: humanity would never be a species that was easily conquered. As they turned to leave, their steps lighter but filled with purpose, Harrick's voice rang out one last time, a reminder that would stay with them long after they left this place. "Remember, cadets, you've proven that humanity is more than just a species. We are a force, and when we stand together, nothing can stand against us." With that, the cadets walked forward into the future, their heads held high, knowing they had not only survived, but had proven something that would echo across the stars. Earth's children were a force to be reckoned with.